Welcome to Reproduction 6, Estrus Synchronization. The challenge of any artificial insemination program is estrus detection and proper timing of insemination. Estrus synchronization is a program to eliminate that problem. So estrus synchronization is a management tool. There are several different protocols within and between species. Conception rate per insemination may be more or less than breeding on natural estrus detection. Estrus synchronization will usually increase pregnancy rate by increasing the number of animals that are artificially inseminated during a certain time period. Synchronization is established by injecting or feeding animals hormones for a short period of time. And these hormones include prostaglandin. Here we have several trade names for the prostaglandin products that are used. So prostaglandin, of course, is a naturally occurring hormone within the animals during the estrus cycle anyway. We're just changing the timing of those hormones by a little bit within those animals to synchronize estrus. So what does prostaglandin do again? We've got a corpus luteum here. We're producing progesterone. The whole system is somewhat quiet. So we're going to give a shot of prostaglandin. It causes the corpus luteum to regress. Progesterone level goes down. The follicle develops and it ovulates. There are two progesterone products on the market. Another name for progesterone is progestins. One product is MGA. This particular product can be fed over a period of time. And another product is a CIDR, which is a device inserted in the vagina that slowly will release progesterone over several days. The way these progesterone products work is that we have progesterone naturally from the corpus luteum, but we can extend that progesterone period by feeding progesterone several days or using a CIDR. So as long as you get progesterone, you're not going to have a follicle. Other hormonal products that we can use is GnRH. So gonadotropin releasing hormone naturally comes from the hypothalamus, but we can inject GnRH to send a signal to the anterior pituitary gland to release FSH or LH. There are several GnRH products on the market, so here are the trade names. They all do the same thing. It's basically GnRH. So here we have the reproductive tract again. We may have a corpus luteum with progesterone, but we've got a developing follicle here. We give a shot of GnRH, causes the follicle to develop. Another shot of GnRH will cause ovulation, and we can inseminate. There are several different protocols that are available for synchronization of estrus in cattle. One here is giving an injection of prostaglandin. Prostaglandin, of course, causes the regression of the corpus luteum, which will then lower the progesterone level, and GnRH is released, and within a few days you're going to have a follicle that matures and ovulates. But one disadvantage of a single prostaglandin injection is that you have to have an active CL for the prostaglandin to work on. And that only occurs during 2 weeks of the 3-week estrus cycle. But if they do have an active CL and you give a shot of prostaglandin, animals will generally come into estrus over a 2 to 5 day period. So we've still got a relatively broad window here where we have to actively check for estruses and then inseminate. To kind of shorten that window of when animals are going to come into estrus, if we have non-lactating cattle, we can feed MGA, which is a progesterone, for 14 days. Then we remove the feed remove the MGA from the feed. 17 days later, we can give an injection of prostaglandin, and most females will show estrus in 2 to 3 days. So you got a 2 to 3 day window instead of a 2 to 5 day window. In this particular protocol is very effective and for non-lactating cattle. Instead of feeding MGA, which is a progesterone device, we can use a CIDR. So we insert the CIDR, which is impregnated with progesterone, in the vagina. The cost of the CIDR relatively more expensive, about $12. On day 6, we inject with prostaglandin. The following day, we remove the CIDR, and animals will come into estrus 2 to 3 days later. It's a fairly effective estrus synchronization program. Well, we're now on the 4th protocol for estrus synchronization in cattle. Day 0, we inject with a GnRH product, and this is a relatively small dose with a small needle, and cows barely notice it. On day 7, do your prostaglandin injection. On day 9, do a second injection of GnRH. And 16 hours later, we can inseminate. And animals ovulate and are fertile without showing estrus. We don't have to watch for estrus. And this particular program works best on lactating cattle. To increase the conception rate and with timed AI, and even make it more successful, we can have what we call Presynch and OvSynch program. So in this case, we do 2 additional injections of prostaglandin. They're given 26 and 12 days prior to that first GnRH injection that we have with the OvSynch program. Note here that there are 5 total injections prior to insemination with this protocol, but it is more effective than OvSynch alone, and it's a lot more effective than natural services. With this particular program in dairy cattle, we've increased the conception rate from 40% up to 60%. Okay, let's go to synchronization in mares now. So we have a product that we can feed. It's a progesterone. It can be fed for 14 days, and generally after taking the progesterone out of the feed, the mare will exhibit estrus about 2 to 4 days later. So it's a relatively effective and cheap way to synchronize your mares. It can also be fed to prevent estrus. Let's say you don't want to breed your mare, but she's cycling every 21 or 22 days. You need to take your mare to a show or performance event. You don't want your mare in estrus at this event, so we can put Regimate into her feed to prevent her from coming into estrus. Horses are seasonal breeders. We can use artificial lighting to bring mares into estrus out of season. So this is not really a synchronization of mares, but artificial light is used to bring mares into estrus in February rather than having them naturally come into estrus until April or May. For the show or racing industry, it is best and it's advantageous for foals to be born in January rather than later on in the spring. Synchromate equine is a synthetic GnRH that has been approved for use in horses. So a single injection can induce ovulation within 48 hours if the ovarian follicle is between 30 and 40 millimeters. So you've got a window here within 48 hours you've got ovulation, so you can plan your artificial insemination accordingly. Naturally, these horses are going to be in estrus 4 to 8 days, in ovulation occurring 1 to 2 days before the end of estrus. This gives you a 5-day range, and timing of insemination can be very difficult. So just one little injection to tighten up that time of ovulation. Synchronization in swine, a little more difficult. One thing about using prostaglandin, it's only effective for about 6 days of that 20-day estrus cycle. So prostaglandin is not a very effective tool for synchronization in swine. We can feed Matrix, which is a progesterone product, for 14 days and then remove the Matrix from the feed, and gilts will come into estrus or sows 2 to 4 days later. But the problem with feeding Matrix is that it's relatively expensive. For this 14-day period, it's going to cost about $22. So generally in swine, we rely upon natural synchronization. Sows will come into estrus 3 to 4 days after weaning, and that's pretty consistent. So we can wean the pigs at a certain time. We know this group of sows is going to come into estrus 3 to 4 days later, and we can breed them. For non-lactating younger animals, gilts, we can move the group of gilts. We can put them on a trailer and give them a ride, bring them back, put them in a different pen, and a lot of times as a group, they'll come into estrus 3 to 4 days later.